Okay, to everybody who is joining us, thank you very much. My name is Benjamin Wittes. We are here in front of, and let me show you the view from where I'm sitting. We are here in front of the Russian press office, which is a part of the embassy. This is the facility. It is mostly unused these days. And as you can see, the Russians have just, I don't mind my friends Matteo and Avery there, the Russians have pulled up and parked a very large van right in front of our projector. They showed up a little while ago with a bunch of guys dressed like ninjas. They're sort of all in black with masks, and they were carrying fire extinguishers and bulletproof vests. And now they are here with an actual effort to physically block the projector. And as you know, I have boasted that the projector is the big ass projector. It is, it's very big and very powerful, but one thing that does is it makes it very hard to move. And so this is a pretty effective little countermeasure. We are going to get to work on dealing with it. But I did promise Ambassador Antonov that if he tried to stop us from showing this movie, we would actually accept that we're not going to be able to show the movie, because this is a movie about the suppression of history, and it's a movie about the suppression of truth, and it's a movie about blocking the truth from coming out. And to be here actually being stopped by the Russian government from showing this film is about as powerful a example of what this film is as I could possibly imagine. And so I want to start, first of all, Agnieszka Holland does not know this but I am the biggest fan of her work in the world ever since I was young and saw the incredible movie Europa, Europa. And I couldn't be more honored to be talking to you under these very peculiar circumstances. But I want to start just by thanking you and thanking Olga as well for joining us this evening. And asking you whether, when you made this movie, which was sort of partially filmed in Ukraine, I believe, you ever expected it to be shown under circumstances like this?
Hello. Hi, Benjamin. Hi, Olga. Hello, everybody.
Hang on just a second. Okay, so bring up Agnieszka's the output audio. Okay, go ahead.
No. When I was shooting this movie, I didn't expect that it will be very well received in Russia, but I hoped in this time, and it was when we started with Andrea to talk about the script she wrote before we met, and to talk about the movie. It was several years ago, and I expected that maybe even it will be possible to show this film in Russia. And with every year, it became clear that it will be quite difficult. And the reaction of the Russian film critics or correspondents from the film festival in Berlin, where the movie premiered in, I guess it was 2018. The reaction of those guys have been really quite virulent. But still, I was hoping that maybe one day we will show this film in Russia and have the opportunity to discuss with Russian audience the content of the film and the situation which is described in the film. My first first meeting with a Russian educated audience happened actually in Israel during the Haifa Film Festival. The film was received with a lot of interest, and we had the very long and very frank Q&A with a quite large audience. It was a few hundred people, and a big part of those people been Jewish immigrants from Russia, and most of them, at least a big part of them, have been educated in Soviet schools. And for them, what we are showing in the film was a total revelation. They never heard about the Holodomor, about the famine. They never heard about the reason why Stalin orchestrated this famine. What was the reaction of the world? What was the output of the famine in terms of the millions of dead people, mostly in Ukraine, not only, but mostly in Ukraine. And it gave me the glimpse into the state of propaganda and the manipulation, not only in the medias, but also in the schools, concerning the recent history, the history of 20th century. So I understood that the audience in Russia is not prepared at all to receive this kind of the statement and this kind of the informations. And I was very glad when I heard that Memorial, the organization which was Russian organization of historians and the people who've been trying to describe and to analyze communist crimes, that they are organizing in Moscow the screening of our film. Unfortunately, this and it was recent. It was like probably 1 year ago, or even not so. And unfortunately, it didn't happen because the squad of Titushkas, of Putin's youth, arrived to the screening room, to the building when the screening was starting, and interrupted it in quite violent way. And not long time after, Memorial was made illegal by Putin's authorities.
Bring it down. So I want to ask Olga to give us a little bit of the history that this movie covers, as well as its relationship to what is going on now.
Well, the movie, touches on Stalin's genocide campaign, primarily against Ukrainians. And we are seeing Russia, and Putin follow in Stalin's footsteps. And we are seeing the same genocide campaign play out today. And I mean, you see that, Putin launched this unlawful war into Ukraine. He launched initially in 2014, and then he expanded and caused a full-scale campaign in February. And you see that they are specifically going for civilians. They're specifically trying to, shut down all the cultural centers, erase Ukrainian culture. And this is basically, a repeat of what Stalin did. And here we are again in a new century and, watching the same thing over, including the theft of grain, because this is exactly what Stalin did.
So Andrea,
Yes.
You wrote the movie, and as you can see, the Russians have parked a large van directly in front of the projector that we were going to use. So you can see there's a very large projector here with Avery standing in front of it. And then the Russians pulled up and parked this van in front of it, directly impeding it. So I'm curious for your reflections on blocking the showing of a movie about the denial of history, the denial of genocide.
Well, they did this already in Moscow when Memorial, what used to be the oldest, most renowned human rights group in Russia, they were dedicated to historical truths, researching and uncovering Stalin's terror. They would give dignity back to the countless victims. They would unearth archives. They would pay tribute to all those who suffered. Their historians were greatly suppressed. They were thrown in prison. They had their lives destroyed with these horrific trumped-up charges, including pedophilia, where one historian was accused of sexually abusing his daughter and was separated from her. Just like really sadistic stuff that they were doing against Memorial. Despite all that, Memorial dared to screen Mr. Jones in Moscow. And what ended up happening, and this was last fall, was a group of Putin thugs, like Putin youth, like Hitler's youth. These young stormtroopers came in and just started screaming all this Russian propaganda, calling it fascist. All the stuff that they say about Ukraine with their justification for the genocide is all genocidal language that they're chanting. And the group Memorial called the authorities. The authorities came, locked the door, kept everyone in, and was questioning, like, how did you know about this screening? How did you hear about this screening? Why did you come here? They tried to take camera equipment, computers from Memorial. It was a very long night. People were kept in that building until 2 a.m. And what ultimately ends up happening is that Russia's mafia state liquidates Memorial. An organization founded by the great Soviet dissident Sarkov. So this was just a huge tragedy, and of course they would do it again. The reason why they shut it down in Moscow was obvious. What we see in Mr. Jones, that was Putin's plan for Ukraine. He's carrying out the same playbook. It's starvation as a weapon. It's starvation as a weapon to kill as many Ukrainians as possible in a genocide, to seize the land for himself and to seize the resources, and they're killing off the people who are the fabric of society, the so-called intelligentsia. They did it back then under Stalin. They're doing it now. They're killing off business leaders, school teachers, civic leaders, everybody across society, like people that make the country run, that make the country what it is. They did that back then during the Holodomor, yeah, of course they're going to block it tonight. We were expecting something. We've been talking about it for so long in their faces. And so I'm sure, so what we do is I know you're the tech wizard there with your BAP, your big ass projector, and I know you put so much into this, and the power of the projector will prevail. The dude will abide, the projector will abide, and so just move it, make them move the van, blast it on them.
What we're gonna do, we're gonna figure out something. But I want to dwell on the on this aspect of it for a minute, because as you said, we knew they were going to do something.
Right.
And in fact, I invited I even tweeted at the ambassador, if we will not respond to your countermeasures. If you stop us from showing it, I'm not going to project it on the side of the van. We're going to try to move it, but I actually think the image of a van driving up and stopping the showing of this film, given what this film is about, which is the stopping of information flowing about the Holodomor in real time. And, people always forget this, but, the only reason that Holocaust denial is impossible is that the camps were liberated. There were films, you can physically go there. And it actually is possible to erase history. The more normal thing is that Stalin kills millions of people, or Mao kills tens of millions of people. And actually, it largely gets erased because the same government controls the territory. And in this case, the suppression of the history of the Holodomor is not complete, but it's remarkably good in the sense that most people grow up not knowing about it. Most people grow up really never having heard the word, let alone, I didn't know the story of Gareth Jones until I worked with Anne Applebaum a number of years ago. You know, this is actually lost history, and for the vast majority of people. And I think it's quite vivid when you write a movie about it, Andrea, and you make a movie about it, Agnieszka, and we seek to show the movie, and then this happens. And, you know, I just want to show this again. Here is the projector that we set up. Here is the speaker systems that we set up. And if you look in back of me, hang on, and let me just turn the camera around. There's a fairly sizable group of people across the street who came to watch it. Let's hear from you guys. And you know, there is actually a community in DC, Ukrainian American, you know, DCers who care. And the aggressiveness with which this Russian government prevents the showing of something like this, the planting of sunflowers. The sunflowers we planted last weekend were destroyed again last night. You know, it does actually say something about the group of people that we're dealing with. So, Agnieszka, I want to ask you, this movie was, a lot of it, I think the urban scenes were filmed in Kharkiv, is that right?
Yes, we shot the big part of the movie in Ukraine, in Kiev, in Kharkiv, and in Dacha, and in the villages around about 100 kilometers from Kiev, where we found the locations and the houses which didn't change practically from the times which are described in our movie. And we met also during the shooting in those villages the very old ladies who've been Holodomor survivors, who've been the children when it happened, and who kept the memory of that without talking about it.
Andrea, tell us a little bit about how you started working on this movie and what the history of it is, and how you got Agnieszka involved.
The film was exactly what you were saying, exactly what Agnieszka was just saying. People carried the history with them. It's a painful history. There's a lot of shame, I think, associated with it when people go through these mass traumas, especially when the broader public isn't aware of it. It's almost like they don't believe you. It's almost like it adds to the isolation that you feel having had this in your family. It's a very dark secret for some families. And in my family, my grandfather and his family, he survived it. And my mother told me about it. And my grandfather, shortly before he passed away, wrote down his life story in Ukrainian. And that's significant because my grandfather was born and raised in Donbass in eastern Ukraine, a part of Ukraine that's been invaded by Russia since this war began in 2014. And my grandfather was born and raised speaking in Ukrainian, thinking in Ukrainian, writing in Ukrainian, because Donbass was very Ukrainian. And it wasn't until Stalin came along and did the Holodomor that it became more and more Russian. He murdered millions, and then the area became populated with the Russians. And that obviously partitioned the country in a lot of ways, politically, at least for a very long time. And so in my family, I just was shocked what my beloved grandfather had gone through. He was just your normal run-of-the-mill grandfather who would take me to the park, take me to get donuts. I would sing songs from the Little Mermaid for him at the top of my lungs, and he thought it was great. And so just to know that this very normal person who was the center of my world had suffered so much, I wanted to get justice for him. And being American, I grew up watching films like Schindler's List, and that's how I learned history. That's how Americans, unfortunately, really get a lot of information and get turned on to things, is through cinema. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know. And so I wanted to tap into that and make a movie that would spread widely. And it was a crazy project, crazy idea. And I fought for a very long time to research, write it, get it made. And it wasn't until our friends here at the Kremlin, who are trying to block our screening, it wasn't until these guys with the white van murdered the charismatic Russian opposition leader Boris Nemtsov, who was an honorary Ukrainian who would give beautiful speeches in Kiev on Maidan Square saying Crimea is Ukraine. He was organizing a nationwide march in Russia against the war. He had some incredible evidence coming out to confirm Putin's invasion of Ukraine. He had gotten this from some families of Russian soldiers. He was energizing the Russians to push back against what Putin was doing in Ukraine. He was uniting them. He was uniting Russians and Ukrainians. And for that, he had to die. And so at the time, my Russian friends here in New York City had reached out to me to join their march in solidarity with Boris Nemtsov in Russia. So we were going to do a big Boris Nemtsov march in New York City with all the Russians. And I remember working on my screenplay. I was following Gareth Jones around the shadows of Moscow. And then I stopped and I checked Twitter. And the first thing I saw was Boris Nemtsov gunned down in the shadow of the Kremlin. And our march here in New York City turned out to be a vigil for Boris Nemtsov. My Russian friends they looked like haunted with shock. Their eyes were just vacant, haunted with shock. And just the anger and the grief and the fear. And we did a big protest, outside the Kremlin consulate in New York City. And I was just so angry. I was just so angry that this brilliant life was taken from us. And so I did largely a page one rewrite of the screenplay, a very angry draft where I just grabbed the reader by the throat and said, how dare you not care about what they're doing? They're doing, this is happening again. This history is repeating. And I sent that very angry draft of the screenplay to Agnieszka Holland. I had luckily connected with her with the help of Timothy Snyder, the great historian. And Agnieszka was, of course, as angry as I was. and she understood very well what the film needed to say. And people around her had warned, don't give your hopes up. Agnieszka is saying no to a lot of big projects with big names attached. She's very busy. Don't count on her. She's just be careful. And Agnieszka, when I met with her in Toronto, where she's on the jury at the Toronto Film Festival, right away, she's like, we're going to film in Ukraine. We're going to do this. And we were off and running. And within 3 years, we were on set in Ukraine and Poland and Scotland. And she had such an urgency and a fire to it. And it's because of that the film got made and the film was released. And just to show the roots of the project, if you watch Mr. Jones, Paul Klebb, this journalist that very early on in the film gets murdered, he's killed with 4 bullets in the back. And that's how Boris Nemtsov was killed, with 4 bullets in the back. So that was our tribute to what they did to Nemtsov that's in the film.
So I want everybody who is watching this online and everybody who is here presently to tweet to urge people to watch the film, because we're not, since they are stopping us from actually showing it here, we should get people to watch it elsewhere. So please tweet that the Russians are physically preventing the showing of this movie, and that everybody should respond by watching it. It's a little bit of resistance that we all can do. It's a little bit of, pardon me, fuck you or nachli to the white van sitting here in front of our projector. And Olga, I want to ask you about a question that's been bothering me for ever since I started doing these projections and these little light demonstrations and the sunflower demonstrations. They really do seem to enrage these people, and they really do seem to make them very angry. They take pretty aggressive action to stop them. They drove up before this white van showed up, they drove up in another white van with big burly guys dressed like ninja, and who were carrying fire extinguishers and bulletproof vests. And, so why do they care?
Well, I mean, for starters, this is one of the things that, I have fought against for a very long time. These are the tactics they use inside of Russia. I mean, for this, they throw people into jail for, holding a blank piece of paper, for, saying the wrong word. You can't say, anything about Stalin. Putin criminalized any kind of discussion on Stalin. God forbid you mention that he collaborated with Hitler, you'll be arrested and you can sit in jail for up to 10 years. So they are used to being able to silence people inside of Russia. And what they do, because, they're really thugs, they take their thuggish practices outside onto Western soil. So the fact that these people showed up and, are trying to intimidate you with bulletproof vests, this is just an extension of what they do inside of Russia, except there, your camera equipment would have been smashed, you would have been jailed after 30 seconds of your live stream, and that's it. And this is a very big problem because we see this, the intimidation of journalists, them using our institutions to go after journalists to try to silence truth. They put, journalists who are reporting facts through horrific lawsuits. So this is just an extension of what they do, and that's it. And I mean, Russia has been rewriting history, and most recently with Putin, they rewrite their history books, and they don't want the truth coming out by any means. And you see this, escalate last year when they literally named every single outlet a foreign agent and pretty much shut down any kind of independent media outlet that was left. There were a few, 2 more left, and they were shut down early this year. So they want, and you also see it with how much money they spend and how much effort they spend in their information warfare that they're conducting, against the West and the disinformation campaigns that they run. This is one of their number one tactic, is to silence truth, to muddle the truth, and to put out, mass disinformation in order for people never to get to the bottom of what's going on.
So I want to I want to ask Agnieszka.
Oh, look at the van! It has the Ukrainian.
We are working on lighting up the van, and we are maybe get some lights on the building too. We're wow. So when it gets a little darker, we'll light up the building. But we're we're gonna make life a little bit mischievous. Agnieszka, sorry, go ahead.
Somebody did ask in the chat from Toronto if the van is parked legally or not legally.
Yes, so the van is parked mostly on Russian territory. Let me see if I can get you an image of this. So if you see that red line of brick, that is the line that separates Russian territory from Washington, D.C. territory. Thanks, Avery. And what you'll see as you look at it is the van is basically mostly parked on Russian territory. And so I think the DC police are most unlikely to tow it, partly because although, I would point out that to my friends in the Metropolitan Police Department over there, if you're listening, the van is not entirely legally parked. And so, and it's actually on a city park, city sidewalk partly. So at a minimum, I think they should get a ticket. But I think, you know, if you wanted to tow the van, so I think we could wait for the van to get a ticket. I think realistically, it's not going to happen. So what we're going to do is try to move the projector to a place where we can actually get a shot on the screen. I'm honestly not confident that we can do it, but we're going to try. And we're going to, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause this live stream and see if we can, now that it's getting dark, see if we can get a shot on the building. And I will tweet once we have things going, if we can get them going.
Okay. Well, and you know, somebody is asking if you cannot just project it on the van, that it will be cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so we may try that too.
Van is white, which is good for the projection, but maybe you are too close with the projector.
Exactly, it's very, very close. But we're gonna try. We're gonna figure something out, and we will. I will keep an eye on my Twitter feed, and we will work on it and see what we can do.
Ben, welcome to working with Agnieszka Holland. You've got to move mountains, all right? Don't take no for an answer. Get it done. She's directing you from Poland. This is how she operates. You're being initiated. So,
and Ben, we're smarter than the Kremlin on any day. So we could figure this out. Yeah. Work around their stupid white van.
Get it done, says Agnieszka.
Thank you all for joining us, and we will keep an eye on Twitter. We are not done here this evening.
Well, do you want the three of us to keep chatting while you attend to things? Because I could interview Agnieszka and Olga.
All right, why don't you do that? And I will just keep this. I'm going to mute myself and deal with see what we can get going.
Okay. Great. Well, ladies, while Ben is busy dealing with all that. So Agnieszka, I want to point out that one of the great pleasures of working with you was all your incredible stories of surviving Soviet occupation. You would mention casually the times you were arrested. You would mention being in Prague during the Soviet invasion, and just extraordinary stories at your time in prison. And the guards, I think your husband at the time sent you cigarettes, and the guards denied you a lighter because he forgot to include a lighter, and they just smoked the cigarettes in front of you. And all of those stories, they would just color the experience of working with you, the writing, the directing, the film. You see it in the final film. That's why it just looks so authentic. How does this, how did all that time, all your stories, how did all those stories sort of motivate you to make the films that you make? And how are you feeling right now watching the Russians trying to bring the Soviet Union back?
Well, I think that what happened to me, it wasn't so tragic or so brutal. I think that much more important was the heritage of my parents, who've been the survivors of the Second World War. My mother was a teenager, the child, and then the teenager in Poland, in Warsaw, and she was. As a very young and very sensitive girl, she was facing the German Nazi occupation and the Holocaust, which was going on around of her. Every time she was going to her school, and it was underground school because the Polish citizens had been not allowed by German to have any other education than purely basic professional. she was passing close to the walls of Jewish ghetto, and actually she helped to save the family of the Jewish refugees from the ghetto, and another young man, and with her girlfriend, they have the tree in Yad Vashem in Jerusalem planted for the writers among the nation. So that was very, very important experience, you know. And she was also taking part as a young soldier in Warsaw Uprising in 1944, which started from August the 1st in 1944.
Wow.
So those stories was my heritage somehow. My father fled, was a Jewish boy, fled on the beginning of the war to the east, and he was a young communist. He was believing, I told you the story of his, you know, of his ideological journey. And he became the soldier first in the Soviet army after when the German attacked the Soviet Union, and then the young officer in the Polish army organized by Stalin. And with this army, he came, he was wounded, he was, you know, he had a lot of adventures. What I know, not from him, but from his comrades, because he never talked about it. And he came with the army to his native town, to Warsaw, believing that he can meet his family, or at least somebody from his family. And he didn't find his family, who was dead in Treblinka and in the ghetto, and didn't find his city, which was totally destroyed during the Warsaw Uprising. First ghetto uprising, Warsaw ghetto uprising, and then Warsaw Uprising. So he's seen, you know, the sea of ruins and no one close to him. I think that was a huge trauma to him for the rest of his short life, and he never talked about it. So he never told me the story about his war experience. He never told me about his family. I even didn't know how my grandparents, what were the names of my grandparents. Fortunately, one of his sisters survived on the fake documents, and after in the forced labor in Germany, hiding her Judaity, of course. And she told me some stories, so I know something about my family because of her. And my father, who was a believing communist, even Stalinist, I will say, after the big Stalinian trials in Czechoslovakia and Hungary, she started to doubt. And when Stalin died, and after when Khrushchev gave his report about Stalin's crimes, the very partly report, of course. It didn't cover everything, and it didn't end the terror entirely. But that it was to the communists over the world, and not only communists, but also the people who somehow sympathized with Stalin and Soviet Union, especially after the victory over Nazis. It was a huge shock. So my father slowly or quickly, actually, started to be very delusional with the reality of the communism, and became some kind of the non-official dissident. It means he started to be very critical about the situation. He was sympathizing with the critical members of the Communist Party in Poland. He wrote about it because he was a journalist. Then he decided that he doesn't want to be journalist anymore because he is impossible to write the truth. So he made the doctorate of sociology and started to travel abroad and to see a bit the world. And in some point in 1961, he was arrested with the accusation of espionage, interrogated for 48 hours, after taken to his apartment to search for his documents. And during this search, on the beginning of the search, actually, he somehow succeeded to open the window, even if it was December and the windows had been totally closed, and jump out and killed himself. So I was 13 there, and that it was the beginning of my thoughts about what this regime really is, and what we can expect. And then I found myself in Czechoslovakia in 1968 as a student, and I've seen the Prague Spring. It means the explosion of the joy and hope of democratization and the freedom, which was brutally crushed after a few months by Russian tanks and Polish tanks, unfortunately, as well. And that it was the end of my illusions, if I had any, that this regime is being run by Russian imperialism, can change to some, can evaluate to some kind of the democratic states, and since then I started to read everything which I had the access to about what happened in Russia. Also, undergroundly, we've been printing and reading Orwell, 1984, and Animal Farm. So when I read on the beginning of your script that it starts with George Orwell writing Animal Farm, I immediately felt home. It was the lecture which was so important to me, that the feeling that it becomes relevant again was very strong trigger for me to think about how to shoot Mr. Jones.
So I've got a little update for everybody. As you can see, we've decided to beautify the van a little bit. We have a large television on the way. We have a smaller projector on the way. And in the meantime, let's just keep talking about the film. And just as you watch this visual, everybody, please remember that we should be watching Mr. Jones right now. But we are not, because the Russian government, and this is a Russian flagged government building. This is an official organ of the Russian state. This isn't, thugs who are, like sympathetic. They're not, these aren't,
it's the Kremlin.
Patriotic hackers or something. This is the Russian government, the official representatives of Vladimir Putin in Washington have endeavored to stop us from showing this movie that is itself about stopping information about genocide from getting out to the world. And so I fully expected they would take some measure to stop it. I actually spent a lot of time thinking, what were they going to do to stop it? What was going to be the mechanism? And I figured out the perfect one for them, which was a fog machine. You actually can't show a movie through a fog machine, but this is pretty crudely effective. It is not going to stop us. We're going to show the movie this evening on the grounds of the Russian press office. We're going to get it done. But in the meantime, keep talking about the film.
Can you blast it at the van in the meantime?
So We can't, because we can't back. There is a car. Let me show you.
Oh.
The projector is here, and there is a car
I see.
parked
I
in
see.
back of it to prevent it from backing up. So
But you can raise the projector.
yeah, so we have to raise it. We have to, but it's extremely large and very heavy. And so we thought a better way to do it would be to bring in alternative means of showing it. So we're gonna get that done. We will be back with you shortly. And
but
in the
Ben,
meantime,
if you hit play on the film, what would we see? Would we see it on the van?
You would see it, a tiny, super small, super bright, blindingly bright image on that would be indiscernible.
Oh, I see.
It would be like staring into a flashlight.
Okay.
But we're gonna get it done.
Okay.
Bear with us, and we will be back with you shortly.
Okay, so people want more of Agnieszka's story in the comments, so we're going to continue. And so both of your mother and your father were journalists. Your mother was Catholic, I believe, and your father was Jewish. And you had mentioned at one time that your mother married him in part to try to protect him in Poland.
No, she married him because he was Jewish.
Right.
And when she was not to protect him, really, it was the vow she did with her girlfriend when they've been like 16, 17, and experienced to be the witnesses to the Holocaust, that if they will survive this war, they will marry Jewish men and will give the birth to Jewish children, which both of them actually did. It wasn't the best reason for the good marriage, I have to say. In case of my mother, at least, they've been not very good. It was not very good marriage, but it was like very noble, idealistic reason. But anyway, history is history. But now, what I wanted to say that my personal experience, even if sometimes a little harsh, or asking me for some kind of the choices, difficult choices, to be courageous or to have quite comfortable life, was not so dramatic and not so radical as the situation which is now in Ukraine. And when I see so many people who are facing this much more dramatic choices, and some of them don't have the choices at all, and their life changed during one night, February 24th, totally, and their stability and feeling of security and hope in the reality and hope in the future was brutally destroyed. And millions of refugees. I was in Poland, in Warsaw, when it happened. So millions of refugees fled, and most of them came to Poland, and a lot of them ended in Poland. So the first thing we did, my friends and myself, it was to try to help those people. And I was able to give the shelter to several in the different homes I have in different countries. But of course, it is little thing, and it was the temporary shelter. I'm not in the position to give my apartment to somebody, because then I will be homeless. But at least I can try to do it for some limited time. And some of the people have been doing even much more than I did. But what is important is that every single meeting with every single women. Most of the refugees are women and elderly and children. It was incredibly painful and heartbreaking and making me angry again story. So those millions of the stories, it's something which those people came from fleeing, you know, the bombs and destruction and rapes and violence. They came with those stories, and now we own those stories, and we have the responsibility to answer to those stories, not only by listening and not only even by eventually putting it on writing or documenting it, but also to help them to fight, to help them, you know, to change the situation. So history, you know, somehow is over. We are in the reality now. It's going on. What we've been fearing when working on Mr. Jones, because we had the impression that this story and this film and the question about, you know, the manipulation and propaganda and corruption of the medias, and, you know, the destroying of the destruction of the history, everything is so relevant, or can be relevant very soon. We had this very strong feeling that exactly when you've been talking about the assassination of Nemtsov, before it was the assassination of many journalists, of Anna Politkovskaya, it was the war in Chechnya, first war, second war. It was this incredible lie of Putin who exploded the houses, the project houses with the people inside, blaming it on Chechen terrorists, which was the reason, the fake reason for, you know, for the second Chechen war. And he needed this war to establish his power, as now he needs Ukrainian war to preserve his power. And every time he was in troubles, he was doing another and another war. But what makes the situation really extremely tragic is that his propaganda this time seems to be even more effective than it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago, that the Russians are really, in big parts, not everybody, of course, and I have a lot of respect for those Russians who are protesting, even if the price can be the years and years in prison. But most of the Russians, or at least a huge part of the Russians, are totally brainwashed, and they believe those bullshits about Nazi Ukrainians and about defending our country and so on, which Putin's propaganda is serving them all day around.
Well, it's what you said. The heart of this is Russian imperialism, and that culture and pride goes very deep inside Russia. What you experienced in Prague in 1968, the Soviet invasion, that was what you called tonight Russian imperialism. Could you talk a little bit about that? I mean, you, age 13, your father dies by suicide while being attacked by the regime. And then you go on to film school in Prague. Prague at the time was a center of European cinema. There's a lot of exciting filmmakers there. You were young, and you're around all this creative energy, and it was this extraordinary time. So could you talk a little bit about that and the aftermath of it for you? Because one thing you said to me from that experience was, one thing that Prague showed you is that fear can spread very quickly.
Yes, the Prague Spring, this carnival of freedom, as Milan Kundera called it, was from February, March 68 till the late August 68 when the tanks came. And even after, for probably 1 year, this anger and this protest against this brutal occupation was somehow present, especially among the youth. But quite quickly, after a few months, we started to feel the signs of change and resignation and escapism from the freedom and the opportunism. And it's when young student Jan Palach decided to put himself on fire to protest not so much about against the occupation, but against this acceptance of the reality, which he found totally toxic for the future of his country. Months later, another young student put himself on fire and died as well. But between the sacrifice of Jan Palach, where the reaction of the society, of the nation was huge, and his funeral changed to some kind of the national manifestation, months later, no one wanted to hear about the next boy. And I realized that the people made some kind of the, how to tell, somehow of the analysis, what is worthy to be against. If the freedom means that you can die, let's forget the freedom. Just let's think about the life, my own private life, when I can be safe. And this change actually happened probably during next year, very quickly. When I graduated from the film school because of the help of the professor there, who wanted to have me out from the school before exactly the situation, political situation will deteriorate, especially after I was arrested. And when I came back to Czechoslovakia a year later from Poland, when I decided to come back, I've seen totally different country. And they called the government the new government because the first secretary of the party was linked, was somehow representative of this process of democratization, Alexander Dubček. He'd been put out, and another guy called Gustav Husak became the first secretary of the party, and very quickly he did the purges on all levels, and the protests, which been quite regular before, the manifestation, the student strikes, stopped. And I found a totally different country. I found the country where the authorities was talking about normalization. Normalization meant exactly conformization and acceptance of the regime, acceptance of the authoritarian communist regime. And it lasted 20 years with a very small group of the dissidents, including Václav Havel, who've been fighting against it, but they've been a bit like the first Christians, in the caves. The people didn't want to hear about them because they've been like the mirror to their cowardice. So it was a very sad country for 20 years. Country I liked so much, and the city I liked so much, Prague. It became very sad and very silent place.
Why did they arrest you, and how long did you spend in prison?
I was only 1 month in prison, and they arrested me for some collaboration, which was very furtive, with the group of Polish dissidents who passed by Prague, and they've been organizing the printing of the underground newspaper, which after been smuggled over the mountains to Poland. And they've been collaborating with some Czech and Slovak people there. In this moment, when it happened, it was not a long time after the invasion. It was the relative freedom in Czechoslovakia, and they've been fooled by that. They've been not careful, and they've been arrested on the border, Czech-Polish border. So after several people have been arrested, and we had the very funny, very Kafkian trials. And actually, you know, it was, of course, it was not pleasant experience, but at the same time, I was very young, I was very curious, and I wanted to figure out how I will be reacting to this situation, to this prison, which was actually a very unpleasant prison, and didn't change from the Stalinian times at all, like physically. And also the guards have been like from the movies about, you know, about Stalinian area. But, you know, it was the experience, and I survived. And I proved to myself that I'm able, at least without the physical tortures, I'm able to stand quite a lot.
I want to ask you specifically about Poland, because Poland played an interesting role in bringing down the empire. In 1970, there was a protest, a workers' protest that was fired on. Several people were killed. And then 10 years later, you have Solidarity, this workers' movement that takes over the whole country. And it was just such a really interesting time in between of Poles pushing back and inspiring each other to keep going and going, where solidarity just became inevitable. And you were in Poland during that time. And could you talk about what motivated Poland to do what, like, how did, like, from your perspective, from what you lived, how did solidarity come about? What was that time like? And
Andrea,
yeah.
you asked me to, it's very complex and complicated and long history. I am unable to make the analysis of that right now. It was many, you know, it means Poles never totally accepted the communism, and especially they couldn't accept the Russian Soviet communism. So the Polish nationalism, which sometimes it's quite nocive, in this case have been the great asset. And actually, just after the war, because Poland was so destroyed and paid such a you know, big price for the Second World War, and lost 6 million of its citizens, including 3 million of Polish Jews, and had the cities destroyed, and, you know, the industry destroyed. The energy of the renovation and rebuilding was so big that somehow the people didn't put so much attention to the politics. And, you know, I have to say that the communists came with the quite important offer to the big part of the society, because the peasants who've been really poor and the victims of the very long serf slavery for the very long time, and never received enough of earth to really be independent financially and didn't have the education. It was, most of them have been illiterate. So suddenly they got, it was the reform, the peasant reform. They got the lands, they got the education, they got the electrification, they got the the medical care, and they got the possibility of the social advance. It means they can go to the schools, to the city, and they created mostly the new working class. And in the official communist propaganda, the working class was the owner of the state, was the ruler of the state. So this propaganda somehow empowered the workers, especially of the big industry workers, and they started to believe that yes, that they have the possibility to change the situation. And most of the big revolts, 1956, 1970, 1980, was led and masterized by working class leaders, of course. In 1980, when the Solidarność was born, it was the collaboration of the intellectuals, students, and working class. And it was first time when all those classes collaborated in one aim, and why it was successful. It was, but the reasons mostly of the explosion of those revolts have been economical. It means the prices of the bread raised, or sausages, or meat before Christmas. That was 1970, the government was so arrogant and stupid that they massively raised the prices of the food just before the Christmas. And people have been, poor. So suddenly they became very angry. And after they started, it always started with the food, but very quickly it was about the freedom.
Yeah, well, Polish resistance is the long history of it is what inspired me to go to Poland to get Mr. Jones made. And I remember, I forget his name, but our on-set photographer, that young man that works with you a lot, that remarkable photographer, he said to me at the wrap party in Warsaw, which happened to be across from the Russian embassy in Warsaw, he said to me, only Poland could make this movie. He said, because we're good because we're crazy because we're good. And it just captured that spirit of like, Poland's not, it's like, they're just going to get it done. Just get it done. It doesn't matter if you're a mass murdering regime, the Kremlin, Poles are going to push back and fight for what they believe in. And there's a long history of that. And you're doing that now.
I don't want to make my countrymen to be like the angels of the freedom, because, it was the dark spots in our history as well. And now we are living for last 6 years under a very strange right-wing regime, which in some way it has a lot of similarities with Putin's agenda. Fortunately, they are pro-Ukrainians now, but in the same time they wanted to make they do everything to weaken European Union, and they wanted to make somehow of the alliance with Salvini or Madame Le Pen, who are Putin's puppets, and Viktor Orban is their main ally, and Viktor Orban is Putin's voice in the European Union. So it is, and I hope that it will end. That this schizophrenic politics, to be very much anti-Russian and at the same time do everything to support Putin's politics concerning European Union, that it will be not successful during the next elections. I hope so. But on another hand, you have, this massive movement of solidarity with the Ukrainians refugees, unseen in any other countries. And the support is sincere and is very, massive and very, very long lasting, because it's already 4 months, 5 months. How much of months it is?
Almost 6.
Almost
All
6.
right, I'm gonna give a little update here. We have brought in a large television screen. We have put it right in front of the building, and as soon as we get that screen connected, the screening of Mr. Jones will begin, and I will get some images for those joining on the live stream of the screening happening with the building in the background. It will not be on the building itself, but the crowd that has gathered here to watch the film will have a chance to do it in the presence of the, and as you can see, we've beautified the van a bit, and the crowd is taking it all with a great good humor. All right, so I am going to get disconnected from audio for a minute because we need the sound cord for the screening. I will reconnect by other means shortly.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, I was just reading the latest question that just came in. Someone wrote that Agnieszka is wonderful. I would listen to a regular podcast with her. Have you considered doing a regular podcast, Agnieszka?
No, I don't think so. No. But I like the discussions, and I like to share my thoughts and experiences with everybody who wants to listen. But I don't think that the word regular just scares me.
Well, being on set with you was like a constant podcast with the conversations we would have. I remember when somebody wanted us to make changes to the script that none of us liked, obviously. And you were so funny. You said, why can't we show them the communist version of the script that they want to see? And because you said in communist times, you would show the communists the script that they wanted to see, and then you'd go out and film something else. And I never forgot that.
It was possible because the post of the minister of the cinematography was very risky one. It was like supper. Because they've been very quickly corrupted, it was enough that they've been invited once to Cannes Film Festival and march on the red carpet, and they wanted to come back again, and they lost this vigilance, this communist, pureness of the ideological pureness, and so they've been fired. And between we presented the script, shot the film, and presented the film, it never happened to me that it was the same guy who accepted the script and who watched the finished product. So it was possible to fool them.
Wow. And one thing I also remember was working with you at your home in northern France on the screenplay. And we both felt very much this impending war was coming. We kept feeling the war coming. And I remember there was this big field by your house, and I just felt this feeling of like phantom tanks and just this impending doom. And that feeling that we had while working on this script, it went into the film in the very early scene where you see Gareth Jones say to the room of old British statesmen, World War III has already started. You just don't know it yet. And that's very much where we were when we were getting, you had the Kremlin tipping the scales in the Brexit vote. You had Trump coming up with all his Kremlin help. And then, of course, you had Putin getting away with all these decades.
Did the same, Andrea. They did the same with Poland. And a lot of people don't understand that before the DNC was hacked, that there was a scandal in Poland called Waitergate, where they secretly tapped, and there was a Russian effort, secretly tapped, I believe, the prime minister and very, prominent people and their discussions, and then released it right before elections. So, I mean, they were the first test case for what we would see in US, and then eventually with Brexit.
Yeah. Agnieszka, do you see the Kremlin, the influence, and other than Orban, do you see it active in Poland in various parties, various ways?
Absolutely. It means, the Poles, except of some really hardworking journalists and historians, they refuse to see the influence of the Russian intelligence services working in political and other areas. And they refuse to see the obvious agents among Polish political class. So, which scares me, for the long time, which I don't understand where it's coming from, because the liberals are afraid to be accused of conspiracy theories so much that they don't see the obvious threat to the democracy which comes from Kremlin. And I try to argue about it and say, why do you think it works in Great Britain, it works in US, it works in France, and it doesn't work in Poland, that they left Poland virgin from this kind of the influences? Now, after the beginning of the full-scale war in Ukraine, I think that this attitude is changing. And what is visible that is changing not only in Poland, it's changing in Germany a lot. It will take time, probably it will translate to some real political decisions. But certainly, the Germany sees that their belief that Putin is business as usual will not gonna work. So, but still, I think that we are behind Putin in this. It means I think he's few steps ahead, because we've been blind to the obvious manipulations and influences. And still now, as I said in my previous words, we can see that Polish government is doing the things which are...
All right, folks, I'm just sorry to interrupt, but we are now starting. We actually have the screening going, and van has blocked the projector, but we are in front of the van.
Nice. There's the Animal Farm pigs. Oh, our wheat field. Agnieszka, I want to ask you. I don't.
Is it in focus? Yeah.
Ben, is it in focus? The director wants to know: is her work in focus? I'm sure it looks amazing.
Do they have some sound as well?
Yeah, for the people there. Yeah, okay. Ben muted us.
Guys, I don't think I will be able to chat for a very long time with you.
One final question, and then you are free to go.
3 a.m. in my place.
It's 3 a.m.
Middle of the night, and my tongue starts to feel it.
Let me ask you one more question, and then you're free. Because I think I benefited from years of listening to you accurately predict the future. So I want to hear from you, and I know other people would too. Where do you see us now? With the war changing everything, where do you see all of this going, especially in regards to Kremlin aggression?
Well, I don't want to be too pessimistic. I think that is the beginning of the Third World War. It means that it's not going in the way Putin expected. I'm incredibly, proud and grateful to the Ukrainian courage and and military perseveration. And the fact that the state is working in those circumstances is just beyond my hopes. And I'm glad that that the West is delivering the modern military arms and equipments. Not enough, probably, but more and more. So military maybe are some hopes that it can go well, but in the same time, this war, it's again like in Stalinian times, led by different means, and the famine and hunger and grains is very important mean, and the consequences of the sanctions, not only to Russia, but also to entire Western world, will be much bigger than we would like to see. And it's very easy to politically to make the destabilization of the Western societies and weaken it. What is Putin's plan exactly? And spreading it to Africa and Middle East means that the millions of refugees will come to Europe again, but Europe will be even less prepared to this kind of the flow that it was in 2015, or then Poland was on the Polish-Belarusian border recently. And it means that, and together with the climate catastrophe, we have the incredible dryness now. For example, in Brittany, which which was always the weather like in UK, less or more in England, we had 40 degrees of Celsius, and everything is dry. The rain didn't came for last 6 weeks, I think. So it's too many problems, and we have China, which is another huge player, and we have Taiwan, and we just recently had the visit of Nancy Pelosi in Taiwan, which I cannot really say if it was brave or stupid. And this accumulation of the problems practically in all places of this planet, it will be difficult to deal with, especially without very strong leadership on our side. And as much as I like Joe Biden, and I like his approach to the war in Ukraine and his leadership concerning this, I don't think that he will be able, and the Democrats in the US, to, especially with weakening economical situation, to win next elections. And if Trump will be back, that it will be the nightmare for the war.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Agnieszka, thank you so much.
Nice notice.
Thank you.
On that note, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You are a godsend to all of us. And
take care. And all my best to Benjamin.
Yes. Thank
you for doing it. And, fuck Mr. Putin, right?
Exactly right.
Yes.
Idina Hui. How
yeah. Putin Huilo.
Yeah. Ciao, guys.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye. Dziękuję. Agnieszka will always have a big piece of my heart to rip apart with her teeth.
She's just such a smart woman. And
she's
it's just
a genius.
So amazing. And it's the scary thing is that it's like you listen to her story and it's watching history repeat itself. And obviously we don't learn. We just continue doing the same thing that generations past did. And then, you have the few who are alert and screaming and silenced, like with that man and with strong powers. And then, the rest just are, unless it affects their own household, they don't care.
Exactly. We just have to stop Viktor Orban from coming to power in America in whatever shape that form that takes. That's the whole lesson of tonight.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I can't hear you guys because it's loud here, but I have an update for you, which is that the Russians have now lit up the building with their attempt to make it impossible to show the film.
Ew, it's a Nazi symbol. That's extraordinary.
The Z lights in the windows. They've turned on all the lights in the building. But there is a large crowd across the street that is watching the film on the screen. And they're now trying to shine lights at us to make it to be distracting. It's, just another Saturday in Washington.
We got to get him kicked out. You know what I mean? It's like, why are they even allowed to be there?
It's pretty great. I mean, you do these operations for them to show who they are. And sometimes they never do disappoint in that regard. So I can't hear you guys, so I'm going to just show images while you guys talk.
Sounds good. Well, Olga and I talk anyways on the phone and have these conversations. So it's like we're just hanging out. Right? Just a Saturday night. I should get a canned margarita for this.
No, I've been advocating for the Russian embassies in the West to be shut down for so long. I do not understand. And this is why we need to hurry up and put pressure on the State Department and Blinken to designate Russia as state sponsor of terrorism, because then we can pack up
these those guys out. They don't deserve to live here. Send those Russians back to Russia. Force them to live.
No, and these are all espionage. This is espionage.
Kick them out.
I mean, this is all it is.
Yeah. That's the Z symbol is just a Nazi symbol at this point. It's like every time I see it, it's like somebody showing a swastika. It's that shocking to see it now.
We're seeing Russia's atrocities now, on full display for the world because people are paying attention because it's just such an egregious, war. But this is what they do. Like, yesterday I tweeted, there are videos of Ukrainian POWs' heads on spikes. There are, a video was going around of a Ukrainian POW being castrated. There are other pictures and videos of, Ukrainians being skinned alive. So, but this is what they do. I remember years ago being asked, to translate a video in Syria because it was Russian speakers. They beheaded someone and taped the beheading and then were playing soccer with their head. So this is their cruel tactics. This is what they do. And, that Z symbol should have been started in 1999 when they started the genocide campaign in Chechnya. And then, ever since have just terrorized everyone. But this is what the Russian military is. And this is exactly an identical copy of the Soviet military. They don't have any logistics. They don't have strategy. Most of them are untrained. But they're very cruel. And that goes back to the nationalistic, brainwashing that they go through, where they are superior and, everyone else is looked down at.
So D. Cushing asks, are we going to be able to watch Mr. Jones here, please? No, given the nature of the screening, as we're seeing, it's not, we're not able to, but you can get it for free off of the online library service Canopy. You could rent it on Amazon. If you have a Hulu subscription, Mr. Jones is on Hulu. It's on cable on demand. It's on YouTube, iTunes. And again, you can get it for free from a library subscription called Canopy with a K, Kanopy. So tonight was more of like and on Rasmussen says it's also on Netflix now.
Yeah.
Is it on Netflix? I think it's on Netflix in some territories, not all, but you have to just check where you live. But I know in the US it's definitely on Hulu. But tonight was more
we were supposed to watch the screening,
yeah,
but you
yeah,
know, until the Russians decided to turn all their lights on for the van and
yeah,
obstruct every kind of which way possible.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, the film is extraordinary because it was directed by an extraordinary woman, as you all heard. And that conversation we had tonight, it was very much what it was like working with her. Those are the conversations we had throughout the making of the film, always on, yeah, just for the 3 years we were together in the trenches. How did I meet her? I met her it all the story the way I met her, and I'm going to share the full story so people can understand how important our actions are, how little things can lead up to big things. I was working on the script for a million years. Nobody wanted it, but I was so inspired by the history, especially the Orwell connection in the film. And so I took all that research and I put it into a self-published Amazon Kindle. I had my friend Molly Crabapple do the cover, and I just published this myself, thinking my nieces would want to read it someday. And that's all. I did it for my nieces. And after I published this book, this self-published book, it's called Orwell and the Refugees. You could read it now on Amazon. It includes the whole history of how Orwell fought to get the truth out about, you heard Agnieszka. Agnieszka was talking how they would bootleg copies of Orwell behind the Iron Curtain. So Orwell and the Refugees is my personal story on how my family immigrated to New York City from a World War II refugee camp with only what they could carry, and they took with them a copy of Orwell's Animal Farm, translated into Ukrainian, made with Orwell's blessing. And I did a whole deep dive book on this, on how this rare translation, extraordinary translation came to be. And in it, I share excerpts of my grandfather's memoir, my grandfather from Donbass, Ukraine, on his experiences being born in Ukraine and then witnessing the Russian Revolution being fought on his family farm, and then and then being nearly starved to death during the famine, and being tortured and being arrested and tortured as a young father during Stalin's purges. So my grandfather lived through the events that Orwell allegorized, and I put that in the book, Orwell and the Refugees. I publish it. A group of college kids in Toronto call me up, and they're like, we want to send you on a 2-week tour of Canada. So I start going on speaking tours around North America and Europe over this self-published book. And when I finally get back home, Ukrainians are protesting in the streets against their Trumpian Kremlin puppet Yanukovych, and some of them are getting beaten up by riot police. And finally, the first protesters are killed. And I reached out to all the groups that had hosted me around the world on these speaking tours. And I through that network, we launched together an SOS emergency hashtag called Digital Maidan. And it became this bat signal calling people around the world to please pay attention to what was happening in Ukraine. And it was the hashtag went viral worldwide on Twitter in a matter of minutes because so many people launched on this Twitter storm. Through that Twitter storm, we did more. I was writing all sorts of pieces, fact checking the Kremlin's propaganda. And through all those efforts, I became friends with a historian by the name of Timothy Snyder. And Tim Snyder was organizing a conference in Ukraine, and he invited Agnieszka Holland, and I saw that she was going, and I reached out to the conference. I said, I want to talk to Agnieszka. I want to interview her. And they gave me her email, and I reached out to her eventually with a screenplay.
That's amazing.
And I wrote to her directly. She did not have time for me. She was very busy. And once she read the script, she right away was we're attached at the hip getting this movie made. She made all the time in the world for me when I needed it. She fought like hell. There were several times there's two times when big fancy money people wanted to fire me, and they dangled millions of euros at us to say, like, just fire the screenwriter. And Agnieszka, both times, she was the final decision of like whether to fire me in order to get all this money to make her movie. And each time she said, no, absolutely not.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. And like, I was a big,
but it's because of someone, because she went through this. I mean, anyone
exactly.
from this part of the world, I mean, we all have history. My family has history. Your family has history, you know. Anyone from that part of the world, and, you know, money's not worth it. If someone paid me any amount of money, you know, to shut my mouth against the Kremlin, I'd be like, I'd take that money. I'd take the money and burn it or donate it. I'd send it to Ukraine by drones.
yeah.
Hey, folks.
Yeah.
Again, I can't hear you, but I just wanted to give you an update. The crowd has all moved to areas where they can see the screen. The police are being very cooperative. The building is now entirely lit up. We have the blue and yellow spotlights on it.
Nice.
And they have lit up the interior. Yeah, that's, let me turn the camera around so you can see the other side of the street. You know, just for those who are watching the live stream, I just, you know, want to emphasize again that, you know, this was a very deliberate attempt to stop the showing of this movie. It occupied enough of my time that I did not hear this discussion, in fact, which I, as Andrea can tell you, fully expected to moderate. Thank you, Andrea, for stepping in and essentially hosting this. We expected this to be live on the side of the wall. Instead, it is the live stream and the wall is, you know, coming to you this way. You know, you kind of roll with the punches. And in this case, one of the audience members brought in a big screen, you know, from out of nowhere. And we are going to screen the whole thing. And I will touch base later on as well.
That's amazing. Thank you, Ben.
Yeah,
Andrea, I need to step away 1 second.
Sure, of course. Okay. So Ben, a guy or somebody there just had a TV, a super large TV?
No, somebody there who works for me at Brookings and Lawfare ran several blocks with a team of people to carry Lawfare's TV screen over here. And yes, I did get a perplexed call from the Brookings security people about whether I had really sent people in the middle of the night on a weekend to come steal a television. And I explained to them that I had. And somebody else ran and got another little projector, which we almost used, but isn't quite powerful enough to put an image on the wall at this distance. Yeah, you know, one of the cool things about the group of people that we that come to these, you know, I jokingly call them special military operations, is that they're very resourceful, they're very committed, and you know, when the Russians do something like this, you know, put a van in the way. It's kind of the sort of van, by the way, that, you know, you would drive up and push somebody into and they'd never be seen again. And, you know, it's when they do stuff like that, people get offended. And there's a pretty strong commitment on the part of a group of people who would show up like this on a Saturday night to not be stopped.
Sorry. So right now, the scene we're watching on the film, that's Kharkiv. That's Kharkiv.
Yes. So as Agnieszka was saying earlier, a lot of the urban scenes here are filmed in Kharkiv. And I have a friend who, by friend, I mean, she's somebody I chat with on Twitter sometimes, who's...
look at that building. See that building in the background? It's like that Stalinist era architecture.
Yeah, I wonder if it's still standing.
Right.
So I guess the thing I really wanted to do was to have Walter Durante's face on this building. but we'll have to satisfy ourselves with getting a picture of it in front of this building.
One thing, so you know how you had the Ukrainian flag operation?
Yes.
Why don't we just take a still of Walter Duranty from the film and add it to like the mix? You know, like next time you just pop up with the Ukrainian flag, you could also add a still of Walter Duranty.
So we can do that.
Good. Okay. So
and it's always good to piss off the Russians.
Yeah. So I just want to say to the Russians there tonight, and we want you to know that tonight's event raised greater awareness of an extremely important and relevant genocide film that more people will watch tonight, especially because you created a bit of a scandal to excite people. So thank you for that. And we want to point out.
Thank you for being you and doing what you normally do.
We're as the Ukrainian soldiers like to say, we're lucky they're so stupid. And so
and that they repeat the same playbook over and over and over.
Exactly.
Always know what to anticipate.
Exactly. And we want you to know that our conversation with the great Agnieszka Holland went longer thanks to you. And Agnieszka shared some extremely powerful and inspiring insights and reminded everyone that the Soviet Union was a failed state and that we will absolutely not go back to that because it's inherently failed. If you heard the core message of what Agnieszka was saying, people pushed back against Russian occupation because the Russians made lives so miserable. The fear finally went away because the misery became greater than the fear. And so the end game of Russia is doom.
Hey, so just an update from here. We just had a conversation with the Secret Service, which is going to shut us down at 10 o'clock because of a DC noise ordinance. To everybody watching at home, when we're going to go dark in about 20 minutes, and we may, which means that people who are watching here will have to finish the film at home. Nobody has left so far. So for those of you at home who have not seen the movie, sorry, this is a loud moment. Please do, and apologies for our having to cut it short, which will happen at 10, but I will come then to say goodbye.
Okay, well, at least this raised awareness of everything that's happening.
Exactly, yeah. And showed Russia's thuggery.
Yeah.
Even in our wonderful DC.
Ben, what's happening in the movie right now? What part are we in?
He has just
nice.
gotten
He's going
on
to
the
Ukraine.
train to
Yes.
Ukraine.
Yeah. Okay, good. And so we have about 24 more minutes. This is good. This is the part we want to see tonight. It's the best part of the film. I want to ask you about your own personal story because Agnieszka shared hers and I shared mine with my grandfather. And what about your parents and your all that they endured?
I mean, they endured KGB rule. They were living in the Soviet Union. We came here in the late 70s. Thank you to America for instituting the Jackson-Barrack amendments, which allowed Soviet Jews to get out of the Soviet Union and whatnot. But during their time there, I mean, it was basically, KGB surveillance. My dad was an activist underground in Kiev. My mom had come from Siberia to study in Ukraine. And then they ended up getting married and living in Ukraine and from Ukraine, Soviet Ukraine at the time. And then came to US. And that's it. But I mean, it was, daily KGB followings, harassments, jailings, they were constantly thrown in jail.
God.
They stepped out, of their home, KGB standing there, and my mom got her first job at a bookstore. She was so excited. She went to start this job. KGB showed up, took her to KGB headquarters. So it was just, I mean, it was extremely, I mean, it's fascinating what they went through. It's heartbreaking. And honestly, the Soviet system destroyed a lot of people because it was a very paranoid society. We saw this when the KGB archives were opened in Ukraine in 2015. You saw how family members were forced to turn on each other, and hand each other in, monitor each other. Neighbors were monitoring neighbors. And again, another practice that Putin brought back that pretty much stopped under Brezhnev, under Gorbachev. But it's another practice that now is being brought back, that basically you see a father turning his daughter in because she's against the war in Ukraine, or your coworker or your uncle or whatnot. And that society, the paranoia is just, it's a horrific way to live. Like, that's not something you can ever recover from, because you just will never have that trust of anyone around you because of how many times you're betrayed. And even Ukrainians, I remember, on the Ukrainian side, like in 2014 or 15, when they opened the KGB archives, like people were just like they broke down to see their own family members being forced to betray each other. And this is what Russia does. And now you even see it in the war, where Russian occupied territory in Ukraine is taking and forcing Ukrainians to go and kill Ukrainians. This is so cruel to make, them. And I mean, what choice do they have? They get thrown on the front line. They're going to get either killed or have to try to defend themselves. And that's just, I mean, it's more than a war. It's more than terrorism. It is such a psychological, horror of how the Russian regime thinks. I mean, they don't, no Western regime government can understand the mentality of that. And imagine us, here we're friends, and now, someone forces me to go pick up arms to kill you. That's just it goes to the core of what evil is.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
When I tell people with the making of the Mr. Jones film that it was tame compared to the reality, and the reality, if I were to really show the film, it would be a horror film. It'd be like one of those over the top Saw movies that are just never ending cruelty and never ending gore. It was just evil what they unleashed, and they want to bring that evil back because it's their form of capitalism. It's really what it is. It's their form of capitalism. It's their form of it's an industry. The Russians have turned evil into an industry. Yeah, and they want to bring it all back because the people at the top are making a lot of money. In Russia, evil is an industry. Evil is an industry. They're not doing this if it wasn't making some people extremely rich.
Putin robbed the whole country. Him and his bandits, they robbed everyone, everything. They own everything, and that's it.
Yeah, and those Nazis that parked the white van where we were supposed to screen our film, those Nazis that did that, those guys are rich. The people around them are rich. They're extremely well off. They get to have Nutella anytime they want. They're extremely, extremely rich compared to the average Russian.
And enablers are beyond rich. I mean, at one point, the DC, where this Russian press office is, I mean, up to prior to February 23rd, you still had a lot of money pouring in from Russia through lobbyists and lawyers and all the other enablers, there. And it's they're infiltrated everywhere. They pay off everyone. Those people, are very wealthy. And that's it. So, I mean, it's something, and then they try to silence, this movie. They don't want it shown. So they will use all their thuggish tactics. I'm still shocked we didn't see Russian thugs, kicking the projector, but I guess they have some kind of respect for U.S. law. They don't want to go to jail. But this is what they do. They don't want information. Anyone who
they don't want to get kicked out of the country. They don't want to have to live in Russia. The reason why those idiot Nazis only parked a van tonight is because they don't want to live in the country they're helping destroy.
Russia, but they're happy to be a mouthpiece for it.
So it is now 10 o'clock, and the Secret Service has asked us to turn off the sound, which we obliged. It was at an unfortunate moment, which is in the middle of the half an hour of his witness of the Holodomor in Ukraine. The audience was extremely understanding and has now mostly dispersed, although there are still some people over there. And we are starting to pack things up. So as with all of these special military operations, they never go according to plan. But they do allow us to show who the adversary is. And in this case, the adversary is a group of people who will drive a white van in front of an effort to tell the story of Russian genocide in Ukraine 70 years ago, even as Russian genocide in Ukraine continues today. Just want to leave with the image of who we're dealing with here, which is a group of people who will drive a van in front of the projection of a movie like this and then light up their building with fascist symbols in order to I mean, this is, like putting a bunch of swastikas in windows, and do that unselfconsciously in the name of sort of chest thumping machismo. And I regret that we were not able to show the full movie in the manner in which we sought to, but I think making it visible who the adversary is and making them show themselves is something that I hope people will take away from this.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And Ben, is the movie still running just without sound?
No, we I thought that was asking a little much of the people across the street. So I encouraged everybody to watch it at home, and I encourage anybody who's listening to this who has not seen the movie, please do watch it. It's among other things, one of the best movies you will see about what is happening now. It is notionally about what happened in 1932, but the misinformation, the disinformation operation that it describes, the manipulation of the press, which is the job of this building that's in front of us. It is literally, that's why we chose this building. The genocidal colonialism and denial and erasure of Ukrainian nationhood, which extends up to and including the prevention of people from showing movies like this. That is continuing, and that is what this movie is about. And my computer is telling me it's going to die in another 2 minutes. So I am going, because they just cut the power from the generator, so I'm back on battery. So unless you guys want to continue, I am going to end the live stream now. Unless you tell me that you guys want to keep chatting, in which case I will not.
Well, I'm going to see Olga for Girls Night Out this week, so we can close it down, and then people can listen to her podcast, Kremlin Files, and my podcast, Gaslit Nation, this week, where we can recap all the great work that you've done with this and the successes of the night, which were many, which we're proud of. And thank you for all of that, Ben.
I know. Thank you.
you're a hero. I want to ask you, what scene did you end on in the film? What was the final image?
The final image, as the Secret Service was telling me I had to shut it down, was the singing.
Wow.
And so it was, I kept them talking to get through that scene and then shut it down afterwards. So, and now it says, my Chromebook says I have 1% remaining. So I am going to stop this now. Thank you both so much for doing this.
Thank you all. Thank you for everyone who stayed with us.
Thank you.
And
I
thanks to
know.
everyone.
Thank you.
And I will edit this and post it to YouTube in the next couple days.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.